So can you briefly introduce yourselves and your podcast activities, including KoreaFM.net and Only in Korea episodes? And please also tell us about what brought you to Korea and how long each of you guys has been living in Korea.
Okay, sure. Why don't I start? So my name's Chance. Along with some other people, I am running KoreaFM.net. And I did that because I'm a freelance radio journalist here in South Korea. I've been here for 2 years, originally from the United States. And I've lived abroad a lot. Unlike some people that come to Korea, maybe it's their first abroad experience. Lived in Latin America, lived in Europe, Los Angeles, LA, Boston. I'm originally from the Midwest in the States. So when I came to Korea, it wasn't my first time abroad. And working here in radio, it's been a little frustrating, and it's also been rewarding. But when I say frustrating, it's because sometimes the topics that you're able to talk about, or even if you talk about a controversial subject, there's pressure not to say certain things or to not bring up certain points of view. Just generally things like that. So what I wanted to do was, in conjunction with some other people I'm working with, including Travis, create KoreaFM.net, and there we do a couple different things. We do talk radio, and we do news, and we do music. So starting with music, I play drums. I've played in a lot of bands. In Hongdae, for instance, I've played in Itaewon a little bit, but mostly, indie band stuff in Hongdae. It's great. You have a lot of fun. But even if you do really well and you're around for a long time, there's not so much chance for exposure, and that's for foreign bands, that's for Korean bands, all the same. Because, K-pop is so big here, right. And unlike in the United States where, even though there's tons of pop music, bands are still big. Like, right. You have bands, right? It's not so much in Korea. And you do have bands. I've gone to concerts and seen bands in Korea that are great, that are from a very long time ago that are still playing. But for the most part, it's, it's kind of like a pop group or someone like Rain, like one guy. So I wanted to give kind of a way to have people access music that's good or see a band at a concert and then be able to play their music online. So we have a 24-hour stream of just tons of bands. It's a mixture of expats, a mixture of expats and Koreans, and sometimes the group will have multiple nationalities inside. Aside from that, I also do not daily but weekly, multiple times usually. A daily news podcast, so it's 3 to 5 minutes, and it's just like 3 or 4 stories that I think are either important or aren't getting a lot of play in the Korean media. And then we also do talk shows. And so one of the talk shows that I've done recently that we started was with Travis, because he is the man who created the Oink Only in Korea Facebook group that's very popular and very infamous, I guess I would say.
Infamous.
And so I enjoy doing that with him. And so once a week, from my house and also from his house, we use Skype, and then I record with good microphones in my house, and we talk about different topics that pop up on the Facebook group, or things that have happened recently having to do with Korea or having to do with something related to Korea, and it's a lot of fun. So I do a lot of reporting for media entities where not all the time, but sometimes I feel a little restricted, and then I don't have that with Korea FM, because myself and other people, we run it, so we can do whatever we want. Now, in Korea, even if you run things, you can't always do whatever you want, and they have defamation laws and things like that. So we're not, going crazy, but we're trying to have fun and also be informative and allow discussion of topics.
So my name's Travis, and I've been living here in Korea it's like my 11th year in Asia, but probably like my 8th or 9th year in Korea. And I've been running the Oink Facebook group for I think about 2 years now, and we have like about 7,000 members. And I kind of got into running that group because I'm interested in Asian media. So before I ran a website called asiapundits.com, and we would focus on like broader Asian issues. And then since I lived in Korea, I kind of became a little more focused on Korea-specific issues. So the group is kind of like, just kind of a go-to place for like memes on Korea or Korean news, discussion on Korea. You get a lot of people who, they're either labeled as like apologists for Korea or people who are like hate Korea, but they're living here. So you get like a, kind of a mixture of both groups, or you get people who, like myself, who's kind of somewhere in the middle. I like living in Korea, like give it or take it or leave it, kind of.
How did you guys start the podcast recording initially, and what was the motivation? Because it's not easy, because if you can think of the activities, it's pretty easy. But if you actually get to do that, if you actually start recording these podcast episodes, you need a lot of preparation. So what was the motivation, and how did you initially think about starting these activities?
Yeah, so I started with a friend of mine, Korea FM, in the summer. And
Summer
then
of-
this summer,
This
so
summer.
this last summer, so
Okay.
6-7 months ago, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And then I got tied up with a lot of different stuff here in the fall. I started attending a graduate program here in Korea, while also still working in the media. And so while I had a lot of time over the summer to start Korea FM and get connected with all these different artists that I knew, and then find more artists through them and put their music online and all these things. That kind of got put on hold while I was working and also studying. And so now during winter break, I have a lot more time, and so I'm jumping back in, trying to add more musicians to our 24/7 stream that we have of music, and then start some new podcast ideas. So I've known Travis for a while. I've written something for his Asian Pundit site in the past. And of course, like I said, Oink is so famous, infamous here in Korea. Lots of interesting discussions taking place there. And so my goal was to not only facilitate conversation about Korea, but it has to have an audience, right? People have to be able to find it.
Right.
So I thought it would be beneficial not only to put Korea FM and Oink together for a podcast, but it would be fun. I'm like a talk
It
radio.
is fun.
Yeah.
I've listened to like every single episode of Oink. There has been like 5 of them, like 4 of them.
I
yeah?
think it's our fourth one.
3 or 4 or
Fourth
something
one,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to do one a week.
Yeah, we
Okay.
just recorded one that'll go up
Like
today.
on a weekly basis, like
Yeah.
We usually record on like Wednesday, and then
So-
it's out on like Friday
Yeah.
or Saturday. Or,
Yeah. So Only in Korea episode pocket recording is part of KoreaFM.net, and you're gonna be doing it on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
That's the
and-
goal. We might take off next week because of the Lunar New Year.
Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun because it's very different than the other things that I've been doing. The other things have been more news-based, and this is more talk-based, which is like my love. I'm more of a talk radio guy back in America, which is sometimes hard going abroad because for better or worse, a lot of things that exist in America don't exist other places. Like I said, for better or worse. So with Oink, we've been able to try to talk about different topics, and that was my goal. I wasn't so integral a part of the Oink community before, so after we started doing the podcast, I got more into it, and I got some positive feedback and also some criticisms from people, and so it's been really interesting. Oh, like some people on Oink, they're like, oh, you guys are doing a podcast, that's great. Like, you guys need to talk about comfort women, and you need to talk about how corrupt the government is, and you got to talk about like all the stuff with North Korea that no one's talking about. I'm like, yeah, these are all great topics, but we're trying to make it topical. I don't want to talk about comfort women every week. Maybe we can talk about it one time and move on, even though there's always new news, especially now with the deal with Japan falling apart. Some people...
We've let users pick, basically, or vote on what they like. A couple episodes, anyway, we had them choose what they would... We give them, 10 topics.
So it's
and then we
not
had them vote.
Yeah.
So the ones that come up at the top usually are the ones people want to hear about.
Going on over there.
Kind of. We pick the topics and let them vote, which out of 10 or so what they would want to... But we let them add topics too. I think we talked about Shori. I think that was a user. That was a user submitted topic. So yeah.
I thought either of you guys pick the topic and then just talk about it.
No.
it depends. Sometimes.
This last week we did.
Yeah. This last week we talked about Korean gift sets. So sometimes it's not always heartbreaking news, like gift sets, if they exist, you get them for soda or Chuseok, but a lot of people don't really like gift sets because who needs 10 packs of toothpaste, so we kind of discussed that, but then the other
We
topic...
talked about North Korea, the American guy who's a tourist who kind of got held up in North Korea.
Yeah. Is he, he's not Korean American, right?
No, he's just a foreign...
He's from,
Virginia or something.
He's I believe, University of Virginia economics student, 21-year-old guy,
So we talked about traveling to North Korea, whether it's safe or whether it's too dangerous or risky.
And we disagreed a little bit. I don't like telling anyone what they can't do. That's sort of, I don't know that that's unique to America, but I feel like that's something in America you get a lot versus other countries. I lived in Germany, lived in Colombia, lived in South Korea. In America, it's like, don't tell me what to do. That's something that we often say. And I don't see a lot of that in other countries, and so I don't want to restrict people. But at the same time, like every time someone gets, detained or kidnapped or whatever it is, the governments have to talk, and then someone high profile has to go there to pick them out. And I'm just like,
escalated into something sounds important.
it would be great if we could just not have this happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the vast majority of Americans who go to North Korea as tourists, they come back and it's okay. So I understand that, it would be limiting, but at the same time, like how many people have to get taken for us to say no more? For years, we couldn't go to Cuba.
Right.
And Cuba was not kidnapping
Well,
people.
we could. We'd have to go through Mexico.
Yeah, but
and
you
then,
weren't supposed to.
Yeah, and then you gotta just file submit a lot of documents. I wanted to travel to Cuba when I was living in the States.
Now you can. Now you can.
Yeah.
When you go to Chicago,
Yeah.
you can easily go to Cuba from. I think there's flights from probably Miami now direct.
Yeah.
Is there direct flights?
Well, there will be if there aren't.
Yeah.
And I'm for that. That's great. We should have been, having relations with Cuba like this years before, and it's great that President Obama is able to do that. But I would like to see a little bit more from the United States than just don't go to North Korea. Please don't go to North Korea, because stuff like this just keeps
Do
happening.
they actually say that? Like
They
They
advise you
wouldn't-
not to
Yeah,
go.
they advise
not
you
to
not.
travel to North
We don't
Korea?
have an
Yeah.
embassy there, so we don't we have if something happens to
Yeah.
an American, I think the Swedes
If you get
have to deal
detained
with
or
it.
something like
Yeah.
it's really difficult.
It's a
to,
pain.
How about the Oink group? So there's Facebook group, and then you guys started the podcast recording. So what was the motivation to create the Facebook group?
Actually, the original purpose was just to kind of share funny pictures of things happening in Korea, or things, a lot of it was we first started sharing pictures of Konglish signs that we noticed, and then people would take pictures of people doing ridiculous things outside in Korea, like someone driving a motorcycle with their child in the basket or something,
Like parking fails.
And then, after in Korea, yeah, I mean, usually I would, but actually my focus, these days with it is to kind of share news stories. So I share a lot of amusing news stories.
But real news stories too.
Yeah. I try to scan every day. Try to scan 10 to 15 English news sources to find quality stuff for our readers, are the people who visit the page. But then there's also people who are on the site who are just there to gripe or to bitch about Korea. So there's I feel like it's a healthy mixture of news, debate, with maybe a little bit of some griping once in a while. But I think people see the group and they're like, oh, these people hate Korea. Actually, I don't hate Korea. I just like observing Korea. It's interesting to me. The whole country. I mean, I'm a foreigner. The whole thing's interesting to me. So I think that a lot of people see it. It's like, oh, these foreigners are bitching about Korea, but it's not really them bitching about Korea. It's more of them just being amused by Korea. It's like, wow, this country, has come from the 1950s where it was complete, almost destroyed during the Korean War to what it is today. So I think you have to be a little bit patient with it. And some people aren't. But Americans will join in and say, I know, isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy that we have so many guns and people are getting killed all the time? But in Korea, you do get people who are very, either they're a foreigner who is maybe married to a Korean, so they're very defensive about Korea, or they're Korean nationalists who are very, my country is good. What's this foreigner doing? Talking shit about my country. So you get that. So my response to those people is always, well, hey, look at my wall on Facebook. I'm always critical of my government, American government. So I'd be equally critical, of my own country too.
But to be truthful, I'm from the Midwest, and this exists
from Iowa, right?
from all over the country.
We're both from the Midwest.
But
I'm South Dakota.
growing up rurally, there are definitely people. People always talk about how different countries are, and Korea obviously has a unique situation. But I've lived all over the world. People are people. It's surprising how similar it is almost anywhere you go. So while there are people in Korea who will be like, who are these foreigners criticizing our government, or who are these Koreans criticizing our the way we live, because they have pride and they're very nationalistic. The same thing exists in the United States. The take it or leave it. The guy with the shotgun, get off my lawn. I mean, that exists everywhere. So anytime that you have people talking about a government, if there was only in America or only in Korea or only in Australia, something like that, you're going to have trolls, people who just want to get a reaction. You're going to have people that are so progressive it's annoying, and then you're going to have people that are hardline, party, this, that, and the other. So Oink has a tendency to sometimes have an image of negativity to it, but I think that anything could be that way. And there's a lot of good discussions that happen there as well.
Getting to the next question. So, when you started this KoreaFM.net and the Oink podcast, probably you can imagine that there's not many like millions of audience like outside Korea who's interested in what is going on in the Korean society. So, are there sufficient audience space for your podcast?
I don't think we've been able to figure that out yet. We do get. I think the best we've gotten is like 2,600 listens or something on that
like
one.
that.
That's not too many, really, if you think about it. But if you were to compare that to my home city, where I come from, where it's 13,000 people, if you could get 20. Pure South Dakota. It's the capital of South Dakota, but it's only got 13,000 people. So if you could get that number of, if you could get 3,000 people from my community listening to something you're doing, that's pretty good. But in Korea, in terms of how many foreigners live here, we probably haven't reached enough people yet. But I think it's doing okay.
Sure, so the Korea FM, like we do so many things. Like I said, we have the online stream, we have a somewhat daily newscast, and then I do the podcast with Oink. I also just do reports on Korea. I also do a podcast with Robert Kohler, the blogger who's lived here for years. He did the Marmot's Hole blog at rjkohler.com. He recently ended that. He's going to spend more time doing photography, which is kind of his new love. So I do a weekly podcast with him as well. So there's lots of different content coming out every couple days. Sometimes I put up a podcast every day. Sometimes it's a podcast episode every 2 days. So I'm not really looking right now for like, how many downloads there, how many downloads there. It's nice when we get hundreds of downloads for each episode, but I'm trying to build a brand / a community / conversation.
What's the best you've gotten for like a single, not including our podcast? Like,
I have a podcast episode from maybe like 3 or 4 months ago that had like 16,000 downloads.
Was that the one we did for?
It was This Week Korea. I used to do a weekly talk show with just like sort of random people, so like other students or people living in Korea or experts. Robert Kohler was on there, I believe, one time. I had a professor on there, I think we had like 15,000 downloads for that one. But that was back when I would upload like one podcast episode a week. And now I'm uploading maybe 4 or 5 podcast episodes.
And they're all getting similar.
And they're all getting,
right?
So it's basically whatever's up gets a lot of hits, and then the new one gets a lot of hits, and then you get some old ones that get downloaded, but the new one is really what gets it.
I see.
So for me right now, this is really like a hobby. I have a job. I do freelance reporting. I play in bands. I have a girlfriend, things like that. He has his job. So just like Oink or just like Korea FM, I plan to live in Korea for a very long time. I feel a very strong connection to this country. So I'm just trying to progress into something, and whatever that would be, who knows? But I like progressing.
I think with podcasts too, there's always a certain segment of society who likes to listen to podcasts. Like I love podcasts. Like every day I play before I go to bed, I'll listen to the BBC like News Hour or something. So I love that format. Or Serial.
Oh, you listen to Serial?
Yeah, it's great. So I mean, I like it, but I think there's only a certain section of society who's going to be into podcasts, and like even sometimes when we put up the topics, people will be like, podcasts still exist? What?
The last poll we had for like, what topic do you want? Someone's like, really? Podcast? 2016 podcast? Yeah. But yeah, no, certain types of people listen to podcasts, but also living as an expat in a country. You've been abroad, we've been abroad. You miss out on certain things. I've lived abroad basically like the last 6 years, and I've missed out on American culture. Like, I don't know who the new people are. Like, I follow politics, but like if I listen to a radio station playing, the pop hits in like Los Angeles, I probably wouldn't even know half the music. So when you're abroad, you miss out on stuff, which means that you have all this extra time to pick up on something else. Right. So when English speakers can have a podcast about the time and the place that they live, focusing on things that they identify with. I'm an American. I live in South Korea. An American just got detained in North Korea. I have a friend who went to North Korea one time and told me about it. Like, these are topics that could be important or at least interesting to me. If you're in the States, maybe you wouldn't listen to it, but I know all my friends that live abroad, whatever they do back home, if they can, they do more of it abroad, because living abroad, you often have more free time.
Yeah, more free time, yeah.
So podcasting seems even more logical for someone living abroad to listen to than someone living at home, because they'll just flip on the radio.
But I think it's like a 1 in 10,000, like 1 in 1,000. You guys, I think this is really admirable. The reason why I was asking like whether there's sufficient audience space is because like you have some operating costs, like even if it's minimal.
Sure.
So like and you have to make it. So that's the reason why I was asking that. And I think it's still admirable whether there's millions of views like on YouTube or whether you have like a couple hundreds. Because you're claiming yourself to be unconventional right there and exceptional, extraordinary. Because you're, I absolutely think that way. Because you're decided to have your voice heard by the world, and that takes a lot of that's
a very, very small segment of the world.
Good
though.
job. Up to 2,000 people a day. Yeah.
You never know. The K-pop's like going abroad, and then you never know, like,
well, they got these guys. I'm sure you probably heard of like Eat Your Kimchi.
Yeah.
Those people. I mean, they put up a
went viral.
video.
They
get 200,000 views, but it's
yeah.
because I think they're specifically focused on like K-pop,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people who are abroad who love K-pop, so it's really easy to pick up a fan base for that.
Right.
I don't really know if it's that easy to pick up a fan base for people who are interested in just like Korean news and.
Yeah.
Foreigners that live here are, I think. You get a lot of people like what really, I mean, a lot of social issues foreigners are interested in here, but I think it's good to mix in a dose of did you ever hear of a group called Bambino, like a K-pop group called Bambino?
Yeah.
This woman became famous because she exposed her crotch on accident, or some people thought that. Like that kind of stuff, people love that on Oink. So they do like K-pop scandals and stuff, but they also, I think they do care about social issues. But if they're out of Korea, probably not. It's hard. It's harder to decide.
But they still exist. I mean, like I've gotten emails from people who are like, "Hey, I live in San Diego, and like I'm a Korean American, and like I found your podcast. Like this is great." So yeah, your everyday Joe in the States. Unfortunately, when people find out I live in Korea, like friends from years ago who I reconnect with, or somehow someone is like, "Oh, you live in South Korea," they're always like, "Ooh, what barbecue,
Or they-
K-pop," and then sometimes, unfortunately, they're like, "Which Korea?"
Yeah, I've had that
do you
from
live
family
in?"
members
So-
before.
But some
You in
people
North
who
Korea?
have a general interest in something so benign as K-pop or something like that, it might trigger something else.
Yeah.
I found that. Like, I'm not getting hundreds of emails, but I've gotten emails from people that are like, "Oh, hey, like this allows me to feel like I'm a little bit connected," especially like the news the news podcast that I do about daily.
All right, moving on. So speaking of the podcast, so in order to run a podcast radio station, like there's like various operating costs. Like you need to buy some equipment, and you need to I'm not sure, but you can run Facebook ads. You can have it like sponsored, so that you can get a more readership and the audience. So like, have you ever had a plan to gain monetary profits out of podcast recordings, or just even like making it just break even?
I'm trying to monetize my Oink group right now. I'm actually almost completed. That's why I need the WordPress guy. I've almost completed a website to be based on. Yeah, so I happen to have like a like a classified ads section, a business directory, a forum with more different topics to cover. So I do plan to monetize it a bit, which is one of the reasons I got into podcasting, because I thought it'd give me a voice, to like. I'm probably going to do crowdfunding at some point, so. That was kind of one of the reasons I got behind it, because I wanted a way to kind of, reach people that I wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. But I don't think we paid for ads or anything on Facebook to promote the...
But with Korea FM, aside from the music and the Korea FM original content, I've partnered with a bunch of other podcasters in Korea, basically all the English podcasters, aside from like the Learn Korean podcast. Those are great resources, but English speakers don't often want to listen to those for information, because that's a specific niche. Like, you want to learn Korean. So basically, other than the language podcast, all the English podcasters that at least I'm aware of, I've teamed up with to feature them on our website. And for the most part, most of them are not making any type of money at all. They're probably just paying for the hosting on their own. I think maybe one or two have been able to move into that, because you need some higher numbers.
It's hard to make money in media these days.
What are the challenges?
It's hard to make money in media. People want you to work for free. So if I approached, I've done this before, and they've accepted my articles when I was writing for Asia Pundits. I've approached media organizations with content that I could provide them, and then they're like, they don't want to pay. They don't want. So I'm like, okay, I'll just keep it then. So a lot of times it's hard to break into getting money to doing what you like. So right now I'm willing to do what I like for free in the hope that it pays off. At some point down the road. Maybe it never will. But if you love what you're doing, then money really isn't.
Yeah, right. So you love what you're doing, and that is why you're doing the podcast recording.
Yeah, that's why we do it. I think is because we do love. I think we both, Chance and I follow Korean media like crazy during the week, so we both, love it. It's just
Let's get to the next topic, K-pop industry and Korean entertainment. So you guys covered Shorty, the internet personality, in one of your episodes of Owning Korea. The Shorty has gained a large traction and she went viral on the internet. So there was even a Western news media that called Shorty South Korea's answer to Marina Abramovic, the performance artist. Shuri is definitely clever, and I think she's even highly intelligent in that she has a great deal of self-knowledge. She knows herself. She knows the ways in which she can best appeal to the audience. Do you think that Shuri is a local phenomena, or is she culture neutral, meaning that she can appeal to the general audience outside Korea, global audience?
Culture neutral. We kind of disagreed about this when we were talking
You
about
can just talk about Shuri
on
like
the podcast.
How you
no,
like her.
I'm just thinking. I mean, when it comes to like an American or someone from outside of Asia, being like, oh, here's a girl who's doing weird stuff, and she has lots of cleavage, and like she's pouring ketchup all over the place. I mean, like, yeah, anyone could appreciate that video for that, but. I think outside of Korea, you miss all the other things. Like she used to do like mukbang stuff.
Like mukbang stuff, and she's doing like these like she's going overboard with like all this live fish.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is that she's done other videos before, and then this was like the next thing she did. But someone who just sees that, who's in Canada or in Mexico or in London, and they just watch the video, they don't know any of that. They're just like, ooh, it's this weird girl doing weird things, like this is funny. So you definitely don't.
Somehow she's hot.
You don't. You don't get all the levels. I mean, I don't particularly enjoy the videos. I don't think that they're really that entertaining, but I understand that other people do, and I applaud her for becoming popular. And hopefully, she's making a lot of revenue from her YouTube hits that she's getting. But I'm not super impressed by it or anything. I think there's more to it than just what's there in the video. But you know. People do things on videos and they make money.
But she's definitely unconventional, and some people say that she's doing that and she's making fun of the Korean society. Korean society, like solemn and like there's a lot of hypocrisy going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's not. I don't think it's that deep, really. Like a lot of people are like, oh, this is like some modern performance art. But I don't see it as being that deep. I think that like she wasn't the first person to do stuff like that on the internet. Like there was a gentleman who was featured on Oink a lot this last summer. He was doing absurd stuff too. He was like eating rice out of his armpits.
Is he Korean?
Yeah, he's a Korean guy.
Absurd.
And he was like, or he would. I can't remember. He just did some like disgusting.
Ramen, like...
he ate toilet ramen. He dumped ramen in the toilet and then ate the ramen out of the toilet.
She has her own style. I'll give her that. Like when you see a video, obviously it's her face, and so she's in the video. But when you watch one of her videos, you're like, yeah, that makes sense for what she does. Like recently, I watched one with my girlfriend because I was trying to explain to her. We were talking about it on the show. The podcast, and she had like a life-size Ken doll, and it was like her boyfriend, and then she left, and then she caught the Ken doll with a Barbie doll, so she went up to the Ken doll and like beat him up and pulled him apart, and then she melted his face with a blowtorch. And I was like, okay, this is a short.
What was they said like never see the other man.
All right. So Psy is definitely bigger than Shorty. Psy, everybody knows Psy like around the world. There's nobody, not a single soul who doesn't know Psy. Psy has become the symbol of Korean pop music industry. So does Psy represent the K-pop industry as a whole, do you think? Or is Psy, do you think Psy is just one-time phenomenon, like temporary, and kind of exceptional example of the Korean K-pop music going globally popular? Do you think will Psy, like the phenomenon, the popularity continue in the long time to come? What do you think?
I think if you get people like Psy once every 5 to 10 years they go global like that, that'll be like a good measure of success. Because so far, I mean, if you look at the other groups that are famous outside of Korea, they're very famous among like Korea Boo type people. Whereas Psy, you hear him in my rural town in South Dakota, you could turn on the radio and hear Psy. So he's kind of been the exception to the rule. But I think it's definitely possible that someone else could come along. And the reason people like Psy, I think, is because his music is very danceable. Even every song that he's released, and he's been teaming up with like really big names. Here in Korea, who like
he had a Snoop Dogg music video.
Yeah, Snoop Dogg. Yeah, I mean, so he's teamed up with like well-known international acts too. So that's kind of helped him to further his career. I think he speaks English also, doesn't he? He speaks.
He went to Boston University.
Yeah, so I mean that that also helps. I think.
Right.
There's a story about Psy this week though. I mean, it kind of made him look like a dick. He was.
Let me tell you about Psy.
Yeah, the cafe. Like he hired thugs to come into this cafe because he wanted the owner out.
Oh, this
and then he
NPR covered
roughed
this
up.
a long time ago.
No, this just happened this week.
This is a long-term story.
Yeah, this is like the end result though. Thugs coming to the cafe and breaking it apart. There's like video of it on the internet. So I thought that was kind of dickish of him. Not related to his music, but.
Yeah.
The thing about Psy, I've interviewed people about Hallyu, the K-pop, everything and how it's going abroad and stuff, and everyone, I think who's been honest with me, they've always been like, no one thought Psy would be the one. Psy was this older guy. He was a K-pop star, but he wasn't A-list. And then he released this album. I think there's a story of like whether or not he was even going to do another album and just kind of continue with the level of fame he had and like do TV and stuff like this. And then this huge phenomena, like he's the #1 YouTube hit ever. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sure someone will break it at some point, but it's hard to imagine because it's still gaining steam. Even the first time I ever heard Gangnam Style, I was in Colombia. Okay. And I heard a remixed version in Colombia. So it matched.
That was back in 2012 or something.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I went to Colombia in 2011. So the first time I ever heard that song, it was like a remix for the local music tastes, like they always, do those things. Yeah. And then I checked it out and I was like, whoa, okay, it's South Korea. So he's huge, but no one ever expected it because it really shouldn't have been Psy. It should have been one of these higher, level groups or people that are more well known, who are more traditional K-pop stars. So Psy definitely represents K-pop because he definitely represents South Korea, but he doesn't really.
And he mixes in enough English too, where a foreign audience can't understand the Korean he's using, but then they hear an English word every once in a while, and like, oh, it's danceable. He's kind of saying something, like. Yeah.
All the people I know that are huge K-pop fans usually don't like Psy.
Okay.
They're okay with him, but like I've never met someone who's like, oh, I love Psy. Like I like this and I like this and this, but oh man,
Gangnam Style. I thought Gangnam Style was good.
No, but it's like a hit. Gangnam Style was a hit. It wasn't necessarily Psy. That's what I've experienced. So I know people who are like, yeah, Psy is okay, and like I've been to a Psy concert, but like.
How about
there's not as much depth there. Where like if you're, what are some other K-pop bands like Big Bang or something like that?
Wonder
like
Girls.
That's your thing, right?
Girls' Generation.
But Psy, he had that one hit, and he's had some other hits after that. But he is a little different.
And he's a one-man act. Like a lot of these groups are like 6 or 7 members, or 10 members sometimes. So he's like kind of unique in the fact that it's just one guy, whereas some of these other groups